coming tonight. My name is Steve Price. I am a volunteer with United Policyholders. I recognize most of your faces, so I know I've seen many of you before. How many people have not been to one of the Roadmap to Recovery workshops? Anyone? Okay, a couple. All right. Tonight we're going to talk about the decision process that goes into whether you want to build, whether you want to buy, or whether you want to just take the money and run. And so I need to get through a few housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce the gentleman to my right. Before I do that, let me introduce Carrie Olivier.
Thank you, and welcome back, everybody. So I just wanted to be sure to remind you that United Policyholders has a survey open right now. It's the 6-month post-fire Black Forest survey. Have any of you gone online and filled that out? Can you give me a show of hands? Yay! Thank you. If you haven't, please be sure to pick up one of these blue cards on your way out, or just go to the uphelp.org website and please fill out the survey to the best of your ability. Sometimes the question won't fit you exactly. Just, do the best you can with that, because it's kind of a broad scope, because that is the information. The only information that we have that's quantitative, that we can then bring to the legislators to ask for action. The insurance industry, other industries gather information, but it's of course from that perspective and not from the perspective of the actual consumer who is dealing with a disaster. And we need to be able to speak for you in that. And the only way we can do that is if we get your feedback. So please take a little time to fill that out. There'll be one in a year also, and it's super important. So fill it out and tell everybody else to fill it out, please. Thank you. Yes?
I started to fill it out when I stopped.
The question was, or the statement was, she started to fill it out and stopped because of concern about privacy. If you will read the language at the bottom there, we do not ever share your name or your information with anyone. That is absolutely rock solid. You don't, obviously if you do it by email, then you're giving us your email address, but there is no sharing or transfer of that at all. It's strictly a counting of numbers. We ask for your zip code in order to know what survey for you to participate in, but it's completely confidential. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. All right, let's get through some of the housekeeping things, and then we can move on with tonight's topic. Uh-oh. This isn't working for me, Wayne.
Did you try it back here?
What's that?
Had you tried it when you were back here?
I didn't.
Is it turned on?
My batteries. I don't see an on switch.
Can you work this for him while I figure
Sure.
that out?
Are you going to put it on the big
Okay.
screen?
There we go. Got it.
But I don't think that's working. I think she did it.
Oh, you did it.
Yep, just tell me when to switch.
It was amazing. It happened absolutely simultaneously. Me pushing the button. You're excellent. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit about United Policyholders. UP is a nonprofit. It was formed by a couple of ladies who came out of the legal industry and have a real heart for folks who've been through disasters. It's made up of an immense number of volunteers. It's a nonprofit, and if you can click again for me. It's completely funded by grants and donations, so they don't take money from any of the folks that are involved in the trades or the insurance companies. They're absolutely clear about that, so they're only funded through grants and donations. Next. A lot of the work gets done by folks like Carrie and I, folks who've been through what you've been through. I picked up a lot of the things that I've learned through one of the folks that's been here before, Karen, as well as Amy, who, again, she lost her house in the fire in San Diego. So there's a real great network, and we rely on that for one another. So the other thing you want to do is go on the website, and if you haven't had a chance to do it, has anyone not had a chance to go to the UP website? Anybody? So you have not done that yet, okay. So here's the web address, it's uphelp.org, or if you just Google in United Policyholders. Again, remember, they're here to provide you with free, helpful information. They're not here to collect any data or share it with anybody. They don't work for insurance companies or anybody that might provide services to you. Everything you do is going to be completely confidential. There's a great, great website with lots and lots of resources there right on the home page. And I'll show you that in just a second. Is a place where you can order the book that I'll show you in a moment, and you'll want to make sure you get that. Okay, next. You can see that United Policyholders has got a lot of experience in helping folks that have gone through major disasters. Right after we lost our house in the Waldo Canyon fire, I felt like there was a connection with what UP had done to help us. And one of the things, thank you, one of the things that I had done is actually made arrangements to go down and help the folks in Norman, Oklahoma following that tornado that blew through. And oddly enough, I was traveling in the Far East, came back, got home late that night. The next day I was supposed to take off for Norman, Oklahoma, and guess what? Black Forest Fire broke out that day. I canceled my trip, and you can see that folks like me are here to help folks like you. So there's a lot of experience, whether it's with fires or hurricanes, floods, hailstorms, whatever it might be. Just an immense amount of experience there. Okay, so I want to do a couple things. Thank a few folks. First, El Paso County has been very generous in terms of underwriting the costs of bringing folks like Amy and Karen out, helping with things like food and whatnot. All the folks up here, the folks that you've seen throughout this series of seminars are all volunteers, but it still takes time and money, and El Paso County has been very, very generous to help out. We want to thank specifically Commissioners Darrell Glenn, Peggy Littleton, and Sally Clark. They've all been working behind the scenes very diligently to help not only UP, but to help each of you, and we owe them our gratitude. I know that they all wanted to be here. Darrell in particular had planned to be here, and the last minute couldn't make it. So if you do run into any of those folks, let them know you appreciate their support. The next is I want to thank Woodman Valley Chapel, Wayne, the staff that are here. Woodman Valley has been very, very gracious and generous to give us their facilities and, to help pick up after and set up for us, let us use their equipment and so forth. So when you see those folks, again, you might just thank them again. And Wayne, hats off to you. He's been here for every one of these seminars. I don't think I even knew this until maybe the second or third session. He lost his house in the Black Forest Fire as well, and so he has a heart for what we're trying to do, and we really appreciate all that you do. We want to thank Aspen Point. They have folks here. Is anybody in here? Here we go, right back here. Good. Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Karen, Cher, they're not here today. They've run out of their holiday baskets, but they've been very, very helpful and really appreciate it. Again, if you run into those folks, let them know. We've got some volunteers from Waldo Canyon. You saw Carrie, many of you know Carrie Olivier. Masami, I see her out there. She's at the table, so she'll be wandering around. Don, my friend Don Almini over here. Don and I met each other just by seeking each other out, and said, "Hey, I think one of us picked up the phone and we got together for lunch, and we've been friends since." And Don just got moved back into his home as well. So really grateful for all the folks that volunteer on behalf of United Policyholders. There's a couple things that the lawyers make us say. It says the information provided in programs intended for general education purposes. It should not be construed as legal advice. And that our speakers today are volunteering their time and doing this for education purposes. And that United Policyholders or El Paso County endorse or warrant the quality of the services of any volunteer speakers. That kind of offends me a little. We got the greatest guys up here, but I get the legal part. So anyway, thank you very much, guys. All right, here's a picture of the UP website. So when you go on uphelp.org, whoops. Oh, we're going the wrong way. When you go onto that website, here's what you'll see. Okay, and down here, this little yellow square is the book that I was talking about. Now, over on the left side is kind of a list of the things that you'd find there. The most important thing to me, from my perspective, are two things. One is there's a library, and it's in the upper section. There's a tab up there that says library. It'll take you to a series of videos, and there you can get videos of Karen Remus. That's what I saw for the very first time. It gave me hope, it gave me energy, it gave me all the ideas to get going and to help settle my claims. So there's a series of webinars, videos there. The county, Nancy, thank you very much for all of your efforts in documenting these and editing them. We really appreciate that. And so you can go back if you haven't seen them and see the prior sessions that we've done here as well. In addition to the library, another thing that you'll see up there is Ask an Expert. And so if you have any question, a good example might be, hey, is the information that I'm about to provide, is that going to be held in, is it going to be confidential? And somebody will respond, there's staff at UP that will respond to you and get back to you right away. If you ask a question about a professional, there are a number of folks that are professionals like Chris and his company, and those folks are spread out across the United States, have a wide range of legal or adjusting or insurance experience, and you can ask them a question, and UP will send your question anonymously to someone like Chris, who will then respond, and you'll see Chris's contact, but he wouldn't see yours. So if you wanted to reach back out to Chris, you would know how to do it, but he wouldn't have a way to contact you because he doesn't know who you are. So that's a really nice benefit. So the library and Ask an Expert. Okay, another thing, it's free, so make sure you go in and register. And again, write in any questions that you've got, and again, you'll get an answer. And this is right off the website. On the right side, there's some samples of some of the things that have been asked and so forth. And again, it's totally confidential. All right, here's a copy. This is a blow-up, a disaster recovery handbook. So if you have not gotten a copy of that, Ms. Hummy, do we have any left? I haven't seen any for a
I
while.
have some that I have access to. If anybody hasn't gotten them here, come see me afterwards.
Okay, thanks. So you can see Carrie.
Online.
Right, or just click online and it'll take you to a little registration, and if you put in your name and address, they'll send it to you free of charge. So it's a nice benefit. We've handed out in the past the USB drives, and all that is a place in a USB that has exactly the same documents you can download for free from the library on the UP website. Okay, I mentioned earlier, there's a Disaster Survivor Support Network. That doesn't roll off my tongue well. They call it DSSN. There's about 160, close to 200 people now, I think, that are folks like us that are just out there to help you and listen and share with you our own experiences and how we've gotten through this. It's not just about settling your claim, but how do you deal with this stuff emotionally, and what happens next, and those kinds of things. So there's the experts, and then you got the folks like us who can really empathize with your situation. We're happy to be there for you. Let's see. Okay. Also, so you know, a copy of this presentation, not just the video, once that is edited down, that'll be posted back to the website, but also a copy of the PowerPoint slides will be available on the UP website as well. So you can also do that for any of the prior sessions that have been done in the past. You can go ahead and download those and take a look at some of that detail if you want to see it. Okay, so I want to give you a quick summary of what we've already done. So the first thing we did is Karen came out, gave us an insurance recovery orientation, and I know many of you were there. It gave us information about the basics of insurance policies and how they work and what coverage A and coverage B is, and those kinds of things, and gave us some sample documents. And then we had our second session, which was about communicating with your insurer. And we also provided you with some examples of sample letters, which you can find right on the UP website, in the library. So if you need to communicate with the insurer about whatever it might be, there are often sample letters. You can download them and put your own name on them and fill in an address and a claim number, and they'd be ready to go. Then we also covered tips for settling the dwelling portion, how to handle coverage A. and all the things that go into that. And then thereafter, we covered examining how to settle your contents portion. So again, if you've got questions about, oh, I'm still having problems with my dwelling claim, or I'm stuck on my contents portion, go back and take a look at those different seminars and pull down the PowerPoints, and you'll be able to see them. I know they are. They're actually in PDF files, so anybody ought to be able to download them. All right, let's see. We also brought in Phil Getzman of Getzman Custom Homes. We talked about building new or rebuilding. So whether it's a partial loss or a full loss, what are the components of an insurance or of a construction contract? What kind of deposits are involved? What are the timelines for development and construction? Phil covered a lot of those kinds of things. How to select a contractor. Carrie had a very nice presentation on partial losses and finding and using contractors to help with those kinds of things as well. Then in December, we had a little meet and greet where it was very informal, where folks were able to break out in groups and talk to the volunteers one-on-one. And hopefully some of you had a chance to really sit down and kind of pick folks' brains and get some great information. So that's kind of where we are. Again, this is another blow-up of the, I guess this is maybe one page back, and what I've done is in the red box on the lower right-hand side, that's the link to the Black Canyon help tips, the Black Forest Fire insurance claims help section, so you can go right into the main section. You look for that on the left side, it will take you over here. On the right side, click on it, and it'll take you to all the things that you'll need or that we've covered already. Okay, so tonight, some of you met Chris in the past. Chris is with Matrix Business Consulting out of Denver. Chris is a public adjuster, a very, very good one. He's got his heart's in the right place. I've known him a while now, and really appreciate all your expertise and how you give of yourself and your expertise to help folks. It's really an amazing thing. Thank you very much. I've got Brad Kellen on my far right. Brad and I are friends, and Brad's a financial consultant with Millennium Financial Group. He's going to talk about what if you take the cash out option, or maybe you decide to go ahead and build, then you're going to sell. What do you want to do in terms of redeploying that money? What are some of the things that you want to think about if you have access to those dollars? And then here in the middle is a very good friend of mine for more than 20 years, John Walker. John is a mortgage lender here in Colorado Springs. He's not tied to one company, or he's done a lot of different kinds of things over his nearly 30 years or something in the business. So whether it's single family or farms and ranches or anything in between, John's got experience in all of that. And so we're going to pick these guys' brains tonight. So with that, let me tell you a little bit about how I want to handle the format tonight, which is a little bit different. In the past, what we've done is kind of kept the clock on each of the guys and then held the questions to the very end. So I think tonight what we want to do is if there are questions that come up during, say, Chris's presentation on what the policy pitfalls are, let's just make your hands known, keep an eye out, make sure you get my attention, and then ask your question. I'll repeat it so we've got it on tape, and then we'll respond that way. I'll kind of keep an eye on the time as well, so don't go too long. And I think we'll still have some time left at the end for Q&A. Okay, so with that, Chris, let me have you pick up the mic there, and we'll turn it over to you.
Everybody here? Loud enough? All right, appreciate you being here, and as Steve had suggested, we're going to talk about certain options, but I think I'm probably going to be covering a good deal of what may have been covered before, specific to your dwelling claim, and I'm sure none of you want anything more than to resolve your claim. We're 7 months into the process, and it is a process. There's another 7 months to go, perhaps longer. But you need to know what your options are, and a lot of it's going to be dependent upon what it is that the carrier ultimately agrees to pay on specific portions of your claim. Tonight we're talking about options as to your dwelling. And I suggest that you got to know your policy again, and until you understand or reach agreement with the carrier as to what it is that they're going to pay, there are certain decisions that you're unable to make. So if we go back to June, July, and August when the fire hit, and we're talking about your dwelling claim, the carrier likely sent out an adjuster and that adjuster prepared an estimate or a summary reflecting the cost the carrier thought would, the amount that they thought they could rebuild your home for. And based on that, they issued you, I'm assuming, an ACV payment. So within a couple months of the fire, the carrier has now issued you a significant chunk of money, and you welcome that. And it perhaps reflects the carrier's goodwill on trying to move forward with the claim. But are there other reasons why they may have issued that check to you? And perhaps there are. Certain policies suggest that once you receive that ACV payment, the clock starts ticking. And they're going to suggest you have 180 days to rebuild your home from the time you receive the ACV payment. So you got to make sure you know your policy. And I'm assuming that those of you who are here do not have your home rebuilt within 7 months. You wouldn't be here if that's the case. So if you received an ACV payment, make sure you understand whether or not a clock is ticking, or if the adjuster is going to come back to you and say, hey, where are you in the process? Are you going to ask for your replacement cost? And of course, you're entitled to your replacement cost benefits. That's what the policy provides. But the policy also does specify that you got to make that known within 180 days. So in this hypothetical, let's say the carrier comes back to you and says, we believe that it costs $300,000 to rebuild your home. And based on that, let's say your home is 20 years old. They're going to apply depreciation to that. And they're going to, let's say 25%, whether that's right or wrong. 25% of $300,000 is $75,000. They cut you a check for $225,000. Okay, so now you have a check for $225,000. Are you done? Is your claim resolved? Please shake your head. No, it's not resolved. Okay, so the question you got to ask yourself is, what do you do now? Can you move forward? Should you move forward? I suggest not, because you don't know whether that estimate is accurate. Perhaps it is, but perhaps it's not. And how do you know if it is? So I strongly suggest that you get somebody else to prepare an estimate for you, somebody that you trust. If you know for a fact that you're going to rebuild your home, perhaps you already have a general contractor in place, and that general contractor can tell you what it is, the cost to rebuild your home. And again, your claim must be for the cost to rebuild your home using materials of like kind and quality the day before the fire. So you can't look forward on what you might want to do. You still have that as an option. That's something that you should consider. But your claim is based solely on what it is that you lost. What you submit to the carrier is what you lost. That's the basis upon which what they're going to pay. So let's say you don't know if you're going to rebuild or purchase something else, but you still need to know what your claim is. There are individuals that are out there, estimators, professional, reputable people, that put estimates together, okay? And whether or not the carrier sat down with you and got detailed information, this estimator will, or your general contractor will. And you need to make sure that the estimate that you submit on your behalf is accurate. Therefore, the individual that you have prepare the estimate needs to be able to defend that estimate and say, yeah, absolutely, it's rock solid, it's going to cost this, with great detail on the rooms and the finishes and the square footage, okay? And now let's say that the estimate that the individual that you have brought in suggests that the cost to rebuild your home is $350,000. Okay, you've got a significant difference. You couldn't have moved forward, or you should not have moved forward based on a $300,000 estimate. Should you move forward based on a $350,000 estimate? No, because you still don't have agreement with the carrier as to what the carrier is going to pay. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, in my hypothetical, we also need to know what? We need to know what your limits are. And where do we go to establish what your limits are? We look at your policy. We look at your declarations pages. The declarations pages will specify your limit, and there are also endorsements that may provide additional coverages. And there are probably conditions on those additional coverages, or how you're able to obtain those funds. But in this hypothetical, where the carrier said it's $300,000, your contractor says it's $350,000, let's say you look at your policy and you have a $280,000 limit. Both individuals suggest you're underinsured. But in reviewing the policy, as all of you have, and knowing what extensions you have, let's say you understand you have a 20% extension. So a 20% extension on your $280,000 coverage provides you with an additional $56,000. So you add the 56 to your 280, now you have $336,000 available to you. Is the carrier going to automatically pay that $336? No. you need to establish that the true cost to rebuild your house is $336. But your carrier, your contractor said $350. Are they going to pay the $350? Nope, the most they're going to pay is the $336,000, correct? But just because you say it doesn't make it so. That's why there's communications that need to go back and forth between you and your carrier. And again, just like the carrier needs to support why it is that he believes $300,000 is accurate, you and your estimator or general contractor need to support why $350,000 is appropriate. And part of what I'm happy to address with any of you here, I brought examples of different endorsements from different carriers. So if it's Allstate, or State Farm, or State Auto, or Hartford, I have examples of endorsements. And the endorsements, while they're similar, they're different as well. Some provide 10% extensions, some up to 50%. And that's why it's important to know the extensions that you may have and what those conditions are to get the funds. Many of you guys may have received payments up to your stated declaration amount, but in order to get the extension, there are conditions that the carrier suggests that are in play for you to get those. And many of them say you need to incur that cost. But the biggest thing is reaching agreement on the cost to rebuild your home. Then there are options that you have available, and that is to rebuild at the same location. Perhaps your policy allows you to rebuild at a different location, or you can purchase an existing home. And as Steve suggested, there are those that just get fed up with the process, and they're willing to take the ACV payment issued by the carrier and move on. Of course, there's mortgage obligations that some people may have, and some people, perhaps they've already paid their mortgage off. But if we go back to the hypothetical, remember the carrier, based on their $300,000 estimate, they issued an ACV payment of $225,000. Let's say that they ultimately reach agreement at $350 as the correct amount to rebuild your home. Again, they're not going to pay the $350, they're going to pay the $336 because that's the stated amount. But if we go back to the calculation using their 25% depreciation, if you take 25% times the $350, or the $50,000 difference, they owe you another $37,500 immediately as a proper ACV payment based solely on their depreciation. Whether or not the depreciation amount was accurate, maybe it should have been 20% of it. That's money in your pocket right there. But the most important thing is reaching agreement with the carrier on the cost to rebuild your home. And again, once you reach that agreement, you are then free to change the footprint of your house. You can change that because you're not asking them to pay for something that you didn't have. You're asking them to pay for what it is that you lost. And once you reach agreement there, they can't dictate how you spend the money that you're entitled to for that claim or for that loss. But you can't submit something to them on rebuilding a house that is totally different than what you had. They need to know what it is that you lost, and then you have that money, and then you're free to move on.
Okay, I have a question. In my circumstance, we were kind of vacillating between whether we would rebuild on our lot or just go someplace else. My carrier was really pushing me early on to tell them what my plans were. Is there an obligation, and do you have advice with respect to should I tell them, hey, I plan to build exactly what I had, or I plan to modify what I had, or I plan to buy something different, or build someplace else, or just take the money?
Well, my suggestion is, so it's your claim, take control of your claim and adjust the claim. You don't need to tell the carrier or their representatives what it is that you anticipate doing. What you need to focus in on is what is your claim. So in your instance, you also want the carrier to be honest with you. You want them to tell you what your true options are versus suggesting that something that may not be applicable is, or suggesting that timelines are in place that aren't, or if they truly are, that they're willing to work with you. You suffered a total loss. Why would they tell you that you need to have something rebuilt within 6, 7, 8 months to receive your replacement cost? That would, to me, is improper. And there are also, you can turn to the Division of Insurance. There are certain bulletins that have been issued for the equitable handling of property claims and natural disasters that request that the carriers be very mindful of the predicament that you're in and to extend you the opportunity to obtain the full replacement cost of your policy. So I probably went around in a circle on your question, but You need to submit your claim, and you need not tell the carrier what it is that you ultimately plan to do. Your focus should be on, how do I adjust my claim, and what are you going to pay on my claim? But some policies are specific. Some policies do not give you the option to rebuild elsewhere. Some say that you must rebuild at that location. Others aren't like that. So again, your policy is your Bible, and it's going to dictate what options you might have. But the biggest thing is please reach agreement before you make decisions on moving forward.
Any questions that come to mind? We'll come back to them as well, yes.
Do you recommend, in terms of getting your full estimate, do you recommend having your specific builder do that estimate or just looking at it?
Okay, so the question is whether, should you have your builder provide an estimate, or do you recommend that you hire a third party that's completely disinterested?
It's a very good question, and the simple answer is, if you know you're going to rebuild, I believe it's extremely powerful for your contractor to support his estimate, because he's going to do that. If you don't know what you're going to do, and you don't have a contractor in place, then someone independent, someone that is, reputable and reliable and will stand behind that. But if you have your own builder who's going to say, hell yeah, that's what's going to cost me, that's who you want defending the estimate that he prepared for you. Okay?
My situation is that they did this detailed estimate, and they were so far above the limits, they basically paid me out 95%. They told me I have to go get a detailed estimate because they're going to pay out the other 5. And I don't really understand why, because I have no dispute that it costs way more, but now it sounds like I need to get somebody that I'm going to have to pay to do another detailed estimate to basically agree with theirs.
I'm not sure I follow your question. I think what I heard you say is they agreed to pay you, they came in and agreed that the cost to replace the home was greatly in excess of policy limits.
Correct.
Is that correct? And yet you're saying there's another 5% you might be able to
Yeah,
get?
and then they paid me 95%.
Oh, I see.
It's unheard of from what
I see. So then they're saying, hey, you have to go get a detailed estimate in order to be able to justify collecting the extra.
That's the formal way of kind of agreeing with them. It's the cost that we should bill. It's like, well, I have no dispute with their estimate. It's like, it's way beyond.
Okay, so you're not disputing their estimate. You're wondering why should I have to go through the brain damage of going out and getting a completely new estimate when we already agree it's greatly in excess of
Well, and I
cost?
also found out that, contractors not going to just do that for nothing. And so there's a cost to be incurred.
So I'm with you. I'm a bit baffled that you would have to do that. You would need to decide what's at stake at that 5%. But they've paid you at policy limits plus the extension, or just the policy limits?
Policy limits and the extensions, but then minus 5% of the total thing.
So they've already issued you payment at the stated declaration with the extension.
Correct.
Minus 5%.
Wow. I've not.
You told me that was unheard of. So, I don't know if I'm done, but maybe I need to write them a letter and say, look, I agree with your estimate, just pay me the rest, and then we'll be done. Is that what I
Well, sometimes, again, if they've issued you that complete payment, and again, please look to make sure that what's included in that payment doesn't include your trees, your debris removal, and other things, because there's the cost to rebuild your home, okay, and then there would be other additional coverages that they would have issued the payment on. They may have gotten to this number, but if you're confident that they've issued you stated declaration limits plus the extension, and they've only withheld 5%, sometimes the condition will be that you need to rebuild and incur that cost before they'll pay it. So you would need to clarify with them what it is that they want. I would be hard pressed to say that you would want to pay somebody to put a detailed estimate together if you're talking $10,000.
And I'm pretty sure, because I talked to my adjuster, he said, well, as soon as you provide us something back that, formally agrees with us, you guys just need to write them a letter and say, I formally agree with you. You guys way underinsured me, so it's just, hey. Do you think that would work?
I'm not quite sure. Let's you and I chat after.
I think he makes a great point, though. You want to make sure you've gotten all of your policy limits on things like your other structures, your trees and shrubs, you know, all of the other things that are out here, debris removal, as well as your coverage A and your extensions.
And I'm pretty sure that's the situation.
Yeah,
What 5%.
yeah, my guess is if you can get, you know, pick a number, but let's say you had 20% extension, if you got 115% of 120 of the 120, that's probably pretty good.
Right, and that's
That's
about where.
probably pretty good.
And I didn't come to the buses, even though I was.
On the other hand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you actually go ahead and build a house, and it costs more than your policy limits, including your extension, they will pay you that extra 5%.
But, just like what you were saying, I don't want that, I don't want whatever I do in the future to determine whether or not I get 5%. And I talked to the lawyer last month, he's got a long way from 5%.
Well, but if it costs you that to get,
And that's where I'm at, right? And
it's not what you get, it's what you keep.
Right. Understood.
Okay,
There are
question?
a number of home builders who offer to give free scope of loss, including Vantage, who gave me a free scope of loss. So you shouldn't have to incur any additional costs, and you can do that for free.
I'd certainly be willing to try that.
Well, oh, yes, they did that.
And the only question I have is after you explain kind of how it normally goes, why would they even have bought? Because they've already, I mean, they estimated, I'd say 35% higher than the limits. So any kind of depreciation.
Well, if you think you're going to build or buy, and that would exceed your policy limits, including your coverage A and your extension, then I think you're exactly right. If you're going to build somewhere, then I think that many builders would offer that as a part of their service. It wouldn't cost you anything.
I hear that. So I need to investigate.
That said, coming back to the kind of the pitfalls of the policy, maybe you could address how insurers sometimes look at that with a little bit of a tainted eye, in that they say, well, there's a quid pro quo. Your builder's giving you the price, but he's kind of feathering his own nest.
Well, if there's a contractor that's prepared an estimate for you, and they're willing to defend that, carriers will suggest that cost can always come down, or something can be done for a cost that's a bit different. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, if you have a reliable estimate prepared by a reputable contractor, you should be fine. Carriers can make whatever suggestions they want as to whether or not there's fluff in that, but that's why the contractor will be able to defend what it is that he has in his estimate. I say that you should be golden if you have a contractor that's reputable and willing to stand behind his estimate. Not that there couldn't be some movement, but again, once the agreement is reached as to what they're going to pay, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Other questions about policy? Yes.
Yeah, I had my scope of loss thing done, and
By whom?
by both the insurance and the builder. And they both said I was underinsured, but again, I have that 20%, and I'm not going to get above that. I know that. But still, when they did this scope of loss thing, nobody asked me anything about what was in my house. Nothing. So when they put down I had laminate countertops, when I didn't have laminate countertops, but yet they paid me out this actual cash value, and I told them, doesn't all this have to be okay, first? Doesn't it have to be right? And they said, well, it'll all work out. So, doesn't it have to read what I have? I mean, why would nobody ask you what you had in your house?
In a perfect world, they should have, but in the game of insurance, if you will, they're trying to determine what it is that they're going to pay. And I've seen many instances, just as you described, that a carrier, an adjuster will come in and he'll write an estimate based on what he believes was there. I've seen many times where people didn't have a dishwasher, they didn't have these kind of countertops, they didn't have this or that, and the carrier included it in his estimate. Therefore, his estimate is not accurate, but he's looking at a price point. He's trying to determine what it would cost to rebuild that. And that's why I'm saying, if you don't have a builder, or if you turn to somebody that's preparing an estimate for you, I would want them to sit down with you and make it as accurate as possible. But at the end of the day, what they're told you is probably true. It's truly trying to figure out what it costs to rebuild your home. And if there's off a bit, it doesn't matter if you're over. The most they're going to pay you is your stated declaration amount plus whatever extension you have applicable. So if it costs $50,000 more than that, they're only going to pay you the amount that the limit plus the extension. And if it's accurate or not, the most they're going to pay you is that. And if they reach agreement that it's that amount, that's the most they're going to pay you.
I have another thing. If on your outbuildings, whatever your,
Other structures,
yeah. Okay, so if you, I'm sorry. You put down my shed, my fence and stuff and whatnot. But I have a retaining wall that was all wood, which needless to say is gone.
yep.
And when they did the debris removal, they ripped it out. And amazingly, that dirt is all staying there. I'm surprised that it has. But does he not have to include the price for that retaining wall?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be part of the other structures, and if you were still within limits.
My limits for the other structures were nowhere near what he paid.
Okay.
From my own experience, what I found is once I got a builder involved, we actually were able to get face-to-face with the insurer. And then we went line by line through the bid. And so my contractor was able to justify each and every line item. There were a couple things where, oh gosh, he had some landscaping in there and they said, we've already paid out under trees and shrubs. Let's take that out. But my builder was very proactive about saying, hey, you've underestimated the cost of whatever, concrete or framing or whatever it might be. So that's an important thing. The other thing I would tell you is that just because you reach agreement, that's not a good reason to stop estimating your total loss. Because to the extent that you have an uninsured loss, you may be able to take what's called an uninsured loss deduction. Okay? So Brad's going to get a chance maybe to touch on that very, very briefly, but I'll just segue to the end. We're going to have a CPA come out from California who lost his home in the Northridge earthquake. He has specialized for 20 years in dealing with uninsured loss deductions. So you'll want to keep an eye out. We don't have the specific, I didn't have the specific date for that. Do you now, Carrie?
No, not yet. It's going to be in February, though.
Okay. So we'll keep an eye out. You'll see if you're signed up through the blogs, etc. You'll see that coming out. Yeah.
And then one other point about that is if you feel you were significantly underinsured, I mean, one sign of that might be that the insurer immediately gives you 100% of your face value and doesn't make you go through all these routines, and you know you were significantly underinsured. You may want to document all those details anyhow in the event that you were going to pursue either with the insurer or through the legal system or something like that, a claim regarding the underinsurance, which is a tough route, but it is still something. You know, if you sign, maybe Chris can comment on that, but if you sign a scope of loss that states that you had linoleum counters when you had granite counters, or that you had 2 bathrooms when you had 4, then you're basically agreeing that you had 2 bathrooms. So,
I've
you
not
know,
signed anything.
so that's just
But
a kind of a
they've given me
cautionary tale,
checks.
right?
They have given me checks, but I've not signed anything.
We can't hear up here what's.
She said if I signed a scope of loss. I said I've not signed anything, but they have given me checks.
Yeah, my point's exactly what Carrie's saying. For example, they put down, I forget, a different kind of countertop. We had granite counters. And I told my carrier flat out, I said, you're not done just because you've hit policy limits. Your job is to help me settle my claim, which includes the fact that I will have a claim for an uninsured loss deduction. So if you think you're underinsured, I think that's most people, then I would tell you, keep the pressure on and make sure that they fully document what you had, because that may be part of the documentation that you'll need to support your uninsured loss deduction.
And one of the questions in our survey will also be about underinsurance, because this is an issue that UP intends to bring before the legislative session, perhaps even this year. So for us to know, you need to know. If you were underinsured by 100,000 or by 200,000 or by 50,000.
And I did do that survey, but a lot of it, because of the fact that I hadn't made any statements about my insurance, I thought, well, I'm not sure an answer was right. Like, were you treated fairly? And he was the first one to say you were underinsured, the adjuster.
I'm sorry I didn't.
I said the adjuster was the first one to say when he came out to my house that he thought I was underinsured. But I have paperwork for things that I have done in the last 5 years that I called the insurance company and said, hey, I finished my basement, and they said, fine. I called them and said, hey, I stuck wood in my house, and they said, that's not going to drop your premium because you still have wood underneath. And I said, okay, I just thought you might want to know. And I called and told them when I put a $5,000 deck on the front porch thing. And apparently nothing changed on the...
Well, that's not a good answer, and you shouldn't let that go, in my opinion. You want them to sign off that that's what you had. They don't know what you had. It's gone. Okay?
Right, and they didn't ask.
But the fact that they're ignoring you means that you need to be diligent about getting them to agree as to what you had, because that could come into play when taking an uninsured loss deduction.
And when you informed them, they did not increase your limit either. That's why you're underinsured, right?
Well, and I did talk to him about that I had called in, and he said, you know, there's kind of a burden of proof, you know.
I'll be happy to chat with you afterwards as well.
I have never met my insurance guy either, because they changed the policy over to somebody else several years ago, and I've never met the man.
I think the rule of thumb is get everything in writing.
Absolutely.
Everything you do should be in writing. I got to a point where I didn't even talk to my adjuster. I said, I'll talk to you in writing. And that's what we did.
But you know, Steve, I do what you said about the emails and stuff and everything. He will not answer one of my emails, not one. And I'm sure he doesn't want to put anything in writing.
But you still have it documented, right? You still have it documented, yeah.
Again, I'll be happy to chat with you. You might want to consider filing a complaint with the Division of Insurance, because they are obligated to communicate with you in the adjustment of your claim, especially if you have things in writing, and they have to do it in a timely manner as well.
Okay. I have one last question I want to ask Chris, and then we'll move on and then come back to Q&A. So, what if somebody were to say, you know, I'm traumatized, I don't want to rebuild. That was my wife. I don't want to rebuild on this lot. We want to go someplace else. So then the option is buying or building someplace else. What kind of policy pitfalls have you seen when people make the decision, say, I'm just going to try to negotiate my policy limits and then go buy something?
So one of the things that, if your policy provides the opportunity to go buy something else, and most of them do, I mean, most of it reads that you can rebuild or replace. And if you replace, you're purchasing something else. So you reach agreement with the carrier on what it is they're going to pay, and it's X number of dollars. Let's say it's $336,000. You are then able to go buy something for $336,000. The adjuster may come back to you and say, okay, the purchase price of this property is $340,000, and it includes land. We're not going to pay you for the land. And if you sit back and look at it, you might understand why they make that argument. It may not make you happy, but your insurance policy insures that property. It doesn't insure the land. The property that you lost is on land. If you sell that land, you benefit from the sale of that land. I've worked on cases where we've represented people, we've settled their claim, and they've gone out and they've purchased a property, and the carrier's not made it an issue. They have not made that an issue. Others will. They'll say, we're going to deduct the cost of the land from this. Therefore, instead of $336,000, we're going to give you $330,000, which means you're coming out of pocket $6,000. You're saying, what the heck? I don't understand. But they're doing it because of the cost of the land.
So the point is, it's probably one of those things you need to negotiate.
Or ask them up front or get it in writing and say, hey, I understand that you're going to pay the full purchase price. Put it on them to tell you why not. But you're saying, you paid me $336,000, period. That's what they agreed to. That's not that they won't make arguments as to why they won't pay certain things, but that's why it's important for you to come back and suggest why it's improper, or like Steve says, perhaps it is negotiation. You just want to move on.
And in that respect, how do they calculate that land value? How have you seen that?
Good question. I'm not quite sure I can tell you. I can help you with your bloody claim, but I can't help you with the purchase of the other property.
Well, I mean, they don't even know is what I've experienced.
Well, sometimes
I ask the question and it's like, well, there's a value on this, information. Ask real estate agent and
Well,
say,
the El Paso County assessor has a valuation on
I
land
understand that.
and the improvements.
but the reality of the matter is that assessed value, particularly in town, is complete crap.
Well,
I mean, it was based upon what that land was worth at the time that house was built.
actually, that's not true. I'm a commercial real estate guy, so I can tell you a little bit about how that works. Every 2 years, your property is reappraised, okay? And what happens at that point in time, if you're residential, there's a different percentage that's applied than commercial. But if you look at the El Paso County website, there's an assessed value, there's a market value. Now, you may disagree with the market value, but the assessed value is simply a percentage of what the assessor says the appraised value is. So both of those show up on their website. If you disagree with the appraised value or the allocation between land and improvements, then you have to have a sit-down discussion with the assessor to say, look, the allocation of land and improvements is wrong, or you've underappraised or overappraised the value of this property. But it's
And that's
both
fine
of
if
those.
I own it, because I can actually discuss with the assessor.
I didn't hear the first
If
part.
I own that property, that's fine. But this is a situation where I would be looking to own a property, and the assessor isn't going to even talk to me about it.
You know, the replacement problem.
Well, they will after you own it. I've been through.
That doesn't
previous-
help me any
Well,
dealing with the insurance
Yeah,
companies,
I-
I'd say.
we're here to point out pitfalls. So now you know.
And that is a very large pitfall,
Right.
is that the land, the insurance company doesn't necessarily provide you with what can you go out, what do you tell your real estate agent that I want to buy, because the land values can be so varied.
Well, I think what I know what I heard Chris say is get that up front from your carrier as to whether or not they'll pay for the entire cost of that property up to your policy limits. If in fact they tell you that they're going to reduce that payout by the allocation of the land, then you've got an argument. Then I think you've got options in terms of negotiating, getting somebody like him involved, getting an attorney involved. You've got lots of other options, but that's a pitfall we're trying to point out. Okay, good. If we have other questions on policy pitfalls, we'll try to come back to those. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it very much. I want to introduce now John Walker. John's a mortgage lender, and I've asked John to talk about a little bit about the financing options that are available to you. And I had a question that kind of popped up, and I thought, gee, if I have a loss like this, does that affect my credit rating right off the bat?
No. The mortgage, the way the payments on the mortgage are handled will affect your credit rating. So it's important during the process of a loss that if you have a mortgage payment that comes due, that mortgage payment needs to be made within 30 days of the due date, or that'll have a substantial effect on the credit. I live in Mountain Shadow. And I didn't have a total loss, but I had a partial loss in June of 2012. And thanks to the help of Chris's partner and Scott, thanks to the help of Steve Price, it took me from June of 2012 until yesterday to get my insurance company to agree to take care of windows that were actually cooked in the fire. So I have a heart for what you guys are going through. Steve asked me to speak for a few minutes and try to make mortgage lending interesting. So having said that, I'm going to introduce Brad. In a perfect world, you'll suffer a loss through a fire like this, and your insurance company will pay you enough to build exactly what you want to have built to replace the house that you lost. But of all the people that I've known in Mountain Shadows, I've never met a single one of them that seemed to live in that perfect world. And what a mortgage company can do to go shoulder to shoulder with you, the first thing you need to understand, I mean, I really have a problem myself when there's information that I don't understand or I don't have. I hate that time that you go to a doctor to have an x-ray done and you have to wait 2 days for them to read the film. That period of time of not knowing just drives me crazy. So a mortgage lender can help you in a couple of different ways. The first thing a mortgage company can do is take a look at your personal financial situation and determine what you're qualified to do on a new mortgage, if that is what you're faced with. And the second thing that a mortgage company can do for you in a case like this is they can show you how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. If you find yourself in a position where the claim that you're paid is not quite going to build what you have to have built, and how do you turn that into a construction loan to complete what you have to have built? And how does that construction loan flow into a mortgage loan? So I would say that for anybody in a situation like this, now some of you have had your houses paid off and you're not faced with a mortgage, that's fantastic. That doesn't apply to most of us. And so I think it's important that you sit with a mortgage lender, let the mortgage lender look at your income, let the mortgage lender look at your debt, we determine how much you're qualified to pay, and from that payment we can extrapolate what that payment is going to do for you in the form of a mortgage amount. We have the tools to orchestrate the flow of the money that is normally being held by the mortgage company, been paid on a claim that had a joint loss payee, into a loan with a bank that can actually extinguish the old mortgage, take the cash left over, provide the new funding to allow you to build what you have to have built. And that's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
Question here.
You mentioned those people that were lucky enough not to have a mortgage. Well, I don't have a mortgage anymore because the insurance company wrote me and the mortgage company a check, and the mortgage company took their money. So I asked them at that time, I was like, well, what am I going to build my house with? And they said, well, we're sorry, we don't offer construction loans at this time. So I kind of feel like they just took their money and kicked me out the door. Is that typical, or it sounded like what you're saying is that other people didn't get their loans off with it. Mine was definitely falling into pay off.
Yeah, so your point is, hey, so the first check that came out was made out to me and the mortgage company, and they took the money and they paid off the mortgage with that. So how do I build my house?
Yeah.
Where do I go from here?
Well, first of all, the first question is that normal? I mean,
Yeah, is that normal?
what you were talking about is that you still have a loan left over, and maybe you need a little extra funding so you get a small construction loan. I'm going to need a big construction loan.
Yeah, I think, John, you might want to address a couple things. One is, what if you have mortgage debt left over? And then the other is, where do you start if you've paid off your loan?
Yeah, so if you have a debt left over, obviously it's a much bigger problem.
That's not the situation.
Yeah, but for many it is. So the piece of the puzzle that's missing there is the value of the land, because the land is still an asset. And if your mortgage is cleared, you become a free and clear owner of that property. So in the way a bank would look at the collateralization of a construction loan, they're going to want to be capitalized to about 20% of what the ultimate cost of that project is. For every $100,000, they're going to want to have $20,000 of equity. That equity can come from cash, or that equity can come from the value of the land and the condition that it's in. And I'm not an expert on insurance. I know that many of my friends in Mountain Shadows that suffered a total loss, the mortgage company would hold the proceeds from the insurance company and disperse those proceeds as work went on with the property. If they weren't going to rebuild, obviously they've got what they need there to liquidate the debt. Whatever's left over is returned to the policyholder, and then they're left with the value of the land. So, the other part of that is that there's a lot of emotion that's tied into a loss like this. There's a lot of emotion that we attach to our personal residence. And it's really hard for people to detach themselves and make a business decision on that investment. And sometimes we wind up in a situation where we're going to build a property that the value of the neighborhood you're building in will not support. So a service a mortgage lender can provide to you with help with Steve and help with a realtor like Wayne, we can actually go out and look at the market value of the properties in your area that are similar to what you want to build. Now what we do as a construction lender, we do a thing called a subject to completion appraisal, where we take a look at your plans, we take a look at the lot, we take a look at the houses that are sold around you, determine what we estimate the value to be when that house is completed. During the construction process, you're going to have access to 80% of that ultimate number.
Other questions? Yes?
But if it's going to cost me $300 and some odd thousand to build my house, and everybody around me burned down, if you go to get a loan, I mean, they're not gonna look at any value to the area around you. I mean,
Yeah,
I have one person on my road that's rebuilding. Out of 12 houses, 3 of them are left, and one, other than me, that I know is rebuilding.
yeah, and so, you know, we'll talk about this afterwards. The values are not determined by what's built next to you or what's built around you. They're
So the
determined,
whole Black Forest area.
well,
What did?
yeah, and so in the underwriting process, you know, a lot of people look at mortgage lenders like they do the Wizard of Oz, and there's a curtain and they don't know what goes on behind the scene. The further out we have to go to find a property similar to what you're building that has sold, the harder it is to get underwriting done. But in Colorado Springs, we have the gamut of places like Briargate, where houses are built on 4,000 square foot lots, to Matheson, where the minimum lot size is 60 acres. So a good lender is going to be able to expand that search. And it's not necessarily, the value is not going to be necessarily determined by what is built next to you. It's going to be determined by what has sold around you. And they're not going to compare a brand new house coming out of the ground that will be new when you move in to a property that is 20 years old or a property that has suffered some kind of a fire loss. So for your house, $320,000, we're going to circle that area. If we can't find a comparable sale, we're going to make the circle a little bigger. And then it's incumbent upon us to make adjustments to determine how that really affects your value. So it sounds overwhelming when you look around, there's no trees, there's no homes. But we're not necessarily looking at what's right next to you. We're looking at what you're going to build and what the value will be when you get that construction finished.
And I'll just add that the values of the lots and homes in Mountain Shadows has gone up dramatically in the past 6 months, year, to a point that we never, I never imagined in this amount of time they would. So time does heal some things, and they do evaluate the value of the land other than just what tragic thing has just happened.
I know, but Mountain Shadows is a subdivision.
Well, no, I understand that. I understand that, but the point is that they're just have hope and don't assume the negative. Go out there and get the good information, and you may find out some better outcomes than you expect.
Yeah, I think, John and Brad and I had lunch the other day and actually talked about this specific topic, and we were reminded of the fact that before Briargate was built, there wasn't a tree out there. And the fortunate part is that there are lots of parts of the Black Forest that weren't impacted at all, essentially, or certainly didn't have the same fire damage. There's Latigo, there's lots of places. So as John says, they'll pick the area and they'll expand the circle until they can find enough sales and then make proper adjustments. So it's not like they come in and say, wow, this is scorched earth, so we're not going to give you any value to it. Okay?
And just to add to that, it's a fairly straightforward and simple process that only takes a day, actually. If we had a good idea of what you were going to build and the location, within a day we can get that comparable data to let you know what to expect that to appraise at. And that's a pretty exact science. I mean, it's not hard to do.
Are construction funds available?
Oh, sure. Again, the big thing for a construction lender is their equity. So a construction lender is not going to lend you more than 80% of what they expect the property to be worth when it's completed. And the other part of that puzzle is they want to know that they have the ability to be paid off. And so that's where a mortgage lender dovetails with a construction lender. They issue a lender letter to say that when the construction is complete, you have the ability to pay that off. Generally, construction loans are made from 12 to 18 months. And there are a number of lenders that if you can demonstrate your experience, they allow you to borrow that money without having a licensed contractor in the driver's seat. So construction funds are certainly available. Yeah.
Maybe you can give us just a brief checklist, maybe not the whole checklist, but what are the big things that folks would need to start pulling together in order to be able to put together a mortgage application?
Yeah, for somebody that's on a fixed income or somebody that's earning wages, it's very straightforward. A lender is going to look at your income, determine what we're able to use from that income from a qualifying point of view. Generally speaking, all of your debt has to fit within a 45% calculation of what your gross monthly income is. For somebody business for self, we're going to look at the last 2 years of filed tax return, and we simply take the net earnings from your business, whether it be a corporation or a sole proprietorship. We're going to add depreciation back in. From that figure for the last 2 years, we divide it by 24 months, that becomes your qualifying income. So as a lender, if you were going to come to me to see what you were qualified for, I need to look at your income. We're going to look at the last 2 years. I need to look at a list of your consumer debt. And the mathematics don't take more than a minute or two to determine where you're going to qualify. It's very simple, very easy to do.
That's good. Other questions for John before we move to Brad? We will come back for a Q&A. Yes? You bring up the question about, you reference a CMA, a comparative market analysis, right? And actually, Wayne, as I mentioned, I introduced him earlier, he's a realtor, and he was telling me he's sold several properties out there. So there are comparables out there. You know, we didn't get into specifics. Wayne, you want to shout out?
What was the question again?
Have there been sales of properties that were affected by the fire?
Yeah, I sold one about, guys, it had to be about a month and a half after the fire, and it had nothing but burned trees. It was depreciated for sure. Value of the land would have been about 150. I sold it for 90, but it was nothing but dead trees, big ones. I sold another one about a month ago, 5 acres that's not burned, not very far from burned area, and I sold it for $155,000. 5 acres. Undeveloped, I mean, it did no well or anything like that. So land is moving out there. There's builders are looking out there, and there's opportunity out there to sell your land if that's what you want to do.
How many acres was that?
5 acres, both of them.
Okay, we'll come back. So if you got other questions about financing, we'll save those and then come back to them. Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate that. Let me introduce Brad Kellen. Brad's a financial planner. He's been in the industry a long time. He comes out of a property casualty background as well, so understands the insurance process. So Brad, thank you very much for your time here today as well.
Happy to be here. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, I've got about 22 years of industry experience here. I've got designations for advanced financial planning, portfolio construction. Probably some of the biggest qualifications I've got is the amount of disasters I've actually lived through. Just by the grace of God, I've been very fortunate that I haven't had a major loss. But going back to any baseball fans, World Series 1989, Battle of the Bay, earthquake. Okay, not at the game, but you know, in the area that was shaken pretty good. We moved down to LA just in time for the riots, man-made disaster there, the floods. O.J. Simpson just about drove by our house in the slow-speed chase. And naturally, we had the Northridge earthquake. We were just about at the center of that one. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, my wife tells me, she's like, you know, we're kind of like storm chasers. You know, we follow these disasters. I'm not so sure if we're chasers or magnets for them. But, so my apologies if we were responsible for any of this. But the biggest thing that we do, my role here as a financial planner is really to help you tie a lot of things together. You're talking an awful lot about trying to gather things, document things, and that's a lot of what we do, but with your financial life. What you're really needing at this moment, especially if you're looking for things like loans, we've got to get a lot of this stuff documented. And when we talk about a process like this, unfortunately with my experience, as I've just outlined, and the other part of my business is you deal with an awful lot of people who, you know, lose spouses and things like that. The process, this type of process is very similar to that. I mean, if you look at things that are people who are just emotionally raw, they're trying to figure out what's the next step for me. Forget about what's going to happen next year. Where am I going to be tomorrow? And I don't have to explain that to you folks in this room, but there's a very specific process that we go through, and a lot of things that we do is really trying to reconnect and say, okay, let's find out where we are today, and let's see where we are. We've got to either reconnect with the goals that we've had, the financial goals and our retirement goals and our retirement dreams, or sometimes modify them and tweak them. And to the extent that we can do either of those things, makes it a success. But the first step is, let's start on track. We've got to get some things moving. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you're trying to deal with some very complex topics that you're never going to deal with unless you go through an event like this. So it's really important that you assemble your own personal team. And that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this United Policyholders Group and everything else. You can reach out to a lot of people that probably won't cost you much, if anything, to get some really good, sound advice. And to the extent that you can really delegate a lot of those responsibilities, it's really going to take the pressure off you. What my biggest recommendation to anybody here, whether it's financial related or anything else, your properties, get an idea in your mind of what you want your life to look like. Okay, what do you want your property to look like? Where do you want to live? And have that fixed in your mind, and go seek out people who are knowledgeable, competent, and trustworthy. Okay, and start right here with Steve, and he can probably refer you to half a dozen people and go interview them. From a financial planning standpoint, a lot of the first step that we're going to do, as I mentioned, we're going to sit down and review somebody's hopes and dreams and goals, some of the challenges and everything else. Every once in a while, there's a little bit of tough love that's involved with it. There's, as I mentioned, a lot of emotions out there. We have a lot of family, a lot of friends, clergy members who are there that can do a really good job giving you a hug and making you feel good. A good financial planner is really going to help you stay on track. We might, if you're a hugger, we'll give you a hug when you come in and one when you leave. But in the middle there, we got to get some things done. And we're going to help you stay on track to what you're trying to accomplish and get you there in the most expeditious way possible. So that's really the role of a good financial planner when you work with somebody like that. The key is, don't allow your financial house to fall just because you're dealing with a lot of things that are very urgent right now. There's a lot of important things that might not be urgent, okay? And there's a big difference. I know you're dealing with a lot of timelines. You're dealing with, things that have to get done yesterday, and you're dealing with an education process. You're really, for me, just a lot of these things, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember doing that in my property and casualty days. I remember all of these things, and it's probably a big reason why I don't do it anymore. But please don't allow everything else to collapse. Keep connected with your dreams. Keep connected with your goals on there. One of the things that we can do, especially when you're dealing with mortgage folks, is help you document everything. Help you pull all of those things together, and I can put it in a format for you that maybe it doesn't have the prettiest pictures in the world, but it's highly user-friendly for you. It says, here's what I've got today. Here's what I've got right now. And to the extent that we may have investments out there, we can project certain growth rates depending on how they're invested. Here's where we expect it to be. And for those of you who may find yourself in a new mortgage that maybe you didn't have one before, we can help you supplement some of those payments with potentially cash flow from assets. There are very effective ways of doing that and some really good ways, and there's a lot of really bad ways of doing that. So that's really the role of the financial planner. One of the things that I spent a lot of my career training financial advisors, how to be a good financial advisor, and it is about leadership. And it's about helping you to find where you want to go, and then putting out a roadmap, and you make the decision. I don't want to make that left turn right there. I want to keep going straight. I want to make a right turn there. And we continue to refine it and get to where you want to be, and with some level of confidence.
So much of what happens, I think, on this side is kind of looking backwards. Mm-hmm. What you're really doing then is helping them to look forward.
That's a great point. In fact, I kind of made a note about that. Unfortunately, with an event like this, you have to look back. You've got to document, try and remember all the things that you had, the heirlooms that were in the house. and again, trying to move some things forward. The one thing that I can say, just listening to the conversation here, is, and I don't have to tell you the need for this, is that you've got to document every conversation you have with anybody. Document who you talk to, the date, the time, and things like that from a legal perspective. That's going to carry an awful lot of weight, even if it's your word against somebody else's. The fact that you made the effort to actually document everything, the people who make decisions, arbitrators and judges, are going to look at that. Hey, you put these notes down as they were occurring. There's a high likelihood that this is accurate. I dictate notes all the time. There are programs out there that you can use to dictate. I call an 800 number and I talk to it, and it sends an email back to me. I used to dictate it and have a live person that I knew transcribe it for me. Don't do that, because I promise you they're going to be looking for a knife to jab in your heart about the third time that you stutter or say or something like that. But there are good programs out there if you're looking for a couple of recommendations on that. Live services where they'll dictate it live, you'll never have to see them, and they do a good job. They just email it right back to you. Keep a log of all that stuff.
I just kind of wanted to bring up some things that I've seen a lot of different people go through. We do get pulled into dealing with some of the more immediate things, but one of the things that United Policyholders has emphasized that I found so valuable is, with the big picture, is keeping your options open and understanding what they are. Because you may be a little numb sometimes from all of this and kind of just float down the path of least resistance, or what you think is expected for you to do if it's rebuild, or is it buy, or is it cash out. So we wanted to provide people here for you that can answer some of your questions to help you shake that out. What are your options, and what are the pitfalls of those options, and what do you need to consider? And I'm thinking of a friend of mine whose home burned, and her home was underinsured, so she got basically the full face value right away. And they didn't have her home documented well in terms of all of the upgrades, but she hit the policy limit by actual cash value. So then, what do? Do you rebuild? Well, her policy required that if she were to rebuild and get any of the code upgrades or any of that money, it had to be rebuilt on the site. And the site had some potential problems because of flooding and things like that. So she actually ended up buying an existing home after shaking through all of these options. But I was amazed as I walked through that with her. There were a lot of intricacies. I mean, there was a lot of money that could have been recovered from the insurance company had she built a big enough house on her existing lot. But her life circumstance was that her house was already too big and she was struggling in maintaining it. So the best decision for her, even though she left some money on the table from the insurance company, was not to rebuild on that lot. And that lot that was, at the time, seemed sort of worthless, is actually very valuable just a year and a half later, and is sort of a backup for her. So, the best outcome is going to vary to what your individual situation is, and hopefully some of these folks and people like them can help you figure out what that is so that you can step back and say, what is going to be the best life situation for me? What are my options and how can I get there? I just wanted to give that example.
Thanks, Carrie. So, there's so many folks in different stages of life. So one of the things, if you're, let's say you're to that point, you're like, I'm not sure I want to rebuild. If you take the cash, you got to do something with it, and you have to live someplace. So leasing or renting, buying a house, whatever, is that something you would typically evaluate with your client?
Yeah, a big thing that we can help clients do, again, that goes back to really what's going to fit your current situation the best, and really help them evaluate that. Sometimes the best thing I can do for a client is help them form the right question. They have this idea in their mind of kind of what they need, but they really don't know how to articulate it, because we're dealing with concepts that they might deal with once or twice in their lifetime. Going back to the analogy of somebody losing a spouse or a loved one, sometimes the toughest thing to do is take that first step and start moving forward in your decisions. And then sometimes things start to snowball, and we get to a point almost, and I had this last week, I had to kind of pull the reins back, and I said, whoa, 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 okay, we don't need to solve everything by the end of next week. But the key is make good decisions at the appropriate time. Don't tie up too much money very early on, because a lot of circumstances may change. You might change your mind half a dozen times of how you want to handle these things. And if you tie yourself up into investments, the latest and greatest thing that's going to make you a millionaire and put somebody else in the jail cell next to Barry Madoff or something like that. Be careful. You don't have to make huge decisions fast, but you do need to start moving forward. And there's a very delicate balance. Yeah.
What are some of the options or the best options for holding or investing that initial dwelling check you get in the very beginning, considering you have to keep it somewhat liquid in the event that you need it in a year or so? What are some of the best things to do with that money?
That's tougher these days than it has been in recent past right now. Just my general rule of thumb, if you need money within the next 6 months or even the next year or so, keep it cash. And I hate saying that, because what money market accounts you might be getting at 0.1%, maybe a whopping 0.5% in some of these accounts. A CD might give you marginally more than that, but again, you're locking it up, and there are potential penalties and things like that when you get out of it. Once you have an idea, a clear idea of where you're going with those funds, and let's say that, hey, I've got my life shored up pretty well. I know that I can afford, I'm not going to need these dollars for a while, or I want to turn it into some sort of income component, but yet still make it liquid. I don't anticipate needing a big chunk of it within the next 12 months or so. Then there's some really good options out there, but that's a 3-hour conversation. I promised Steve I'd keep my part to an hour and a half. But there are some options in that respect. If you're going to need the money soon, and that's really where you're dealing with widows and orphans and things like that, and they get these big checks. You're just $500,000 that just, okay, Dad died, but here's $500,000. What are we going to do? Sometimes the most important thing that I do is meet with the entire family. I said, okay, this is the last car we're going to buy for all you kids. And we're not going to get involved in flipping houses, because none of you guys know what you're doing. We're not going to start a new business. Mom needs some time to adjust. And so sometimes, from a financial planning standpoint, I think you're safer in this environment right now, because conservative investments are some of the most difficult investments right now. Those of you who have conservative investments in bonds and things like that, you might be seeing those things dropping a little bit. Now, there's some reasons for that. So there's alternatives to do fixed income types of investments that'll participate in rising interest rates and all that fun stuff. But for those initial checks, if you think you're going to be using it in the next 12 months, be very, very careful tying them up. CD is probably the most aggressive I would do, but I just don't think a 1% CD is worth the cost of the liquidity of that money.
Can you address the FDIC and the safest way to sort of spread your money in a financial institution?
You want to make sure you can. There's two sides to the FDIC component. Is that it's the government insuring these dollars that say, hey, you can have it. So a lot of people, $1 million comes in, you don't want to stick it in your checking account because only $250,000 of that or whatever is going to be insured under FDIC. FDIC can be a little bit misleading. If a bank does truly fail, you're guaranteed to get your money back, just not right away. So be sensitive with that too. FDIC doesn't cure everything, but not a bad idea to spread it around different institutions, particularly if it's a large check. Somebody else had a question?
Brad, what would someone expect to pay a financial planner? How does that work for an initial consultation?
The financial planning consultation is going to vary. Most people will do an initial consultation for free for you. So you can sit down and just get a rough idea of where they're going to go and what they're going to do. Being the magnet that potentially caused some of this anyway, I've committed that if anybody's been affected by this, if you want to come in, I'll commit to 3 consultations for you. And the idea being, let's help you develop a financial position, bring in your documents, we'll pull everything together for you. We'll develop a financial position, we'll put some basic projections together on what we think your investments may be worth based on how they're currently invested right now, and based on what your goals are, and potentially new goals right now. We'll help you rough out kind of a roadmap and a strategy of how we think that you ought to at least get started and get a few things moving forward. So, come grab me, I'll get you my card, and when you call my office, just let them know that you've attended this event, and they'll know. It's up to 3 consultations, and we'll take it farther if we need to.
Thanks. Yeah, question?
I just keep asking questions, I'm sorry.
It's perfect timing, we're at that point.
When you talk about the documents and stuff, do I need to get copies of my back taxes and stuff and whatnot? Is it possible to get copies of those?
Yes, you can. If you need copies of taxes, and it's not a bad idea to do it. It wouldn't be number 1 on my list. I don't like the IRS.
My divorce papers?
No, you can get there's a phrase for it. You can just contact the IRS. They'll send you copies of all your back taxes. Transfer, thank you. And get the smart guy in there. Transcripts of that. A lot of the documents, financial documents and things like that are available online. So sometimes what we'll do in my office, I'll just, I've got a big monitor sitting on my desk. I'll hand the client the keyboard and say, log into your accounts. And we'll just pull up that data for you, and we'll start, piecing it together.
And there are links, I think, the Red Cross, and maybe even on the county website. This isn't the first time, so there are protocols of the websites and how you can go to get all those documents recreated that exist somewhere.
That's a great question. I saw a question here. Let us know who you want to address your question to.
Actually, my name is Steve. When I saw the original, when I saw what this meeting was about, I had a completely different idea. So I'm going to throw out 3 ideas that I wanted to kind of get some feedback on. I've heard rumors about setbacks from trees being changed by either insurance companies or by the lawmaking bodies. I don't know who might do that, but basically the fire department said they follow what the county does. So that was a concern. In terms of thinking about maybe I'm going to rebuild in the Black Forest. Are they going to make me be 100 feet from all the trees out there when I rebuild? So that's one.
I think I can put to John on this.
Can I throw these 3 out there first? The second one was...
Let's take it one at a time.
Okay.
The question was, there's a lot of different information out there. What are we going to have to do in terms of rebuilding, and what are the setback requirements? Who's controlling it? I don't know either. I believe, thank you.
We have RC here from the county. And I can make a comment with regard to insurance companies. It depends on your lot, on your zoning, and on who your insurance company is. Some are going to be more controlling about that than others. They may say, no, we won't insure your new home unless you have 100 feet of, on a 5-acre lot of cleared defensible space. But then there are other insurers who won't. You can't know that until you put your feet in the water and ask it. But you can do that fairly easily. You just contact the insurance companies and have them come and tell you, just kind of like Johnny was talking about, to get an idea of what the value of your new home might be. You can find out about the insurability of your new home. And RC will address the county stuff.
I don't know how well I'll address the county stuff, but the question you ask is really pertinent, and we've been dealing with it with several parts of it. One is the hazard tree removal, getting a contract for that, what trees will be removed and what won't. But specifically to your question, and I think it was the first commissioners meeting in December, the fire chiefs wanted to adopt a fire code. They wanted to update the fire code. The fire code's reissued, I believe it's every 3 years. So it's like 2000, and the municipalities and counties are always a couple years behind. And I think they were looking at the 2009 code. But the chiefs had added some things to it, and it had to do with water delivery capability in areas, and having cisterns depending on how big a piece of property you had in your house. And some of the trade-offs for that really bothered the commissioners, and you can pull it up online and look at the meeting because the chiefs did a presentation, the Home Builders Association were there, and the commissioners had some questions. What they finally came down on the parts of the code they agreed upon, which was actually about 97% of it, they adopted. The thing that they would not budge much on was the fire chiefs previously on some of the water requirements had been taking money in lieu of actually requiring that water requirement. And it was going to what was called a rural water fund to develop cisterns for the whole community. The problem that the commissioners had with that was that money had not been tracked real well. And they felt like that money was going to the fire departments to maybe bolster their equipment or whatever. I can't speak to that. We didn't even try to track that. But I'll tell you, the commissioners put that on ice. As far as the setbacks, as far as, and we're working on a change in terminology here. I just went to and the Wildfire Prevention Partners in the area issued a report, and you can get it online. I think you can go to, it's called the Wildfire Prevention Partners, and pull up an 8-page report. But one of the things they identified was people had done a lot of mitigation on their property, but neighbors had not, and their property still got destroyed, even with mitigation. So one of the things in the fire business, which is what I did before I came to this county job, was we're trying to change some of that terminology from defensible space to survivable space. Trying to identify for people it'll help your property survive, but it's not a guarantee. What the commissioners did on that part of it, as far as how wide roads should be, depending on how many properties were on it, on setbacks, on removal of, or not removal of trees, on how close trees could be to properties, was they put that off to put it under the land use code, which is being reviewed in March and April. So they kind of took it out of the fire code, the fire chief's hands, because it looked like it was going to become contentious, and they want to address it in the land use code. And one of the things that came up in it was there were exceptions there if there were only going to be like 4 pieces of property developed on a certain roadway. It only had to be a certain width. But the issue that came up was, do you allow that piecemeal to where you end up with 80 homes on a road that should have been twice as wide to allow for access and egress in an emergency. So all those things are continuing to be discussed, are continuing to be debated. Obviously the builders have, land use development people have an issue in it. County has an issue with it. The different fire protection districts involved have issues with it. Black Forest, Falcon, that type of thing. So that is a lot of rambling that didn't really answer your question. You said, what are those going to be? And right now the answer is, we don't know, and it continues to be developed.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, basically the fire department deferred to the county, who was deferring until March to have somebody ready to about reading. There's still a question about whether the insurance will actually insure you with, or they have a setback requirement, and then there might be a lender requirement. So I've asked I've tried to ask all 4 of these types of agencies, my own insurance, my own, but the county, I don't even really know who to ask. The fire department, the Black Forest Fire Department told me they'll defer to whatever the county decides, and if they agree with what you just told me.
Because what happens is the fire protection districts in the unincorporated area of the county, Black Forest, make recommendations, and the county commissioners, the Board of County Commissioners, have to adopt those recommendations.
Okay,
What happened in December was they adopted like 97% of them, and on those 3%, the commissioners like, you're being too restrictive. We're not buying off on that. And those should be addressed as far as the trees, the width of roads, the distance between homes, those types of things should be addressed in the land use code.
So ultimately, the county will make a declaration.
Those will be county decisions. Now, your lender and insurance company decisions are a completely different thing, obviously, that we can't address.
Okay, so if I have a building permit from Pikes Peak Regional Building Department today, and then they make these new rules, what's the implication of that? Do you have any idea how that'll play out?
The code that should be addressed to your building should be the code that was in effect when you got the building permit.
Okay, so if I wait till May to get my building permit, it might not be legal to build my house, is what I mean. I'm just speculating. If they decide that.
It wouldn't be illegal to build your house, but you may have to build it under different code applications. Meaning if they decide that the driveway needs to be 25 foot wide instead of 20 foot wide, that would be the new code that would be applicable to your home at that time.
I think one of the things that we take away is that we're in a fluid state, right? I had lunch with a builder today who's building in Black Forest. And essentially that's what he said. He said, look, the fire department tried to impose a lot of things. The county pulled it back. Right now, to answer your question, if you go to regional building department, they'll tell you exactly what the requirement is today. Now, could your lender or your insurance company impose something more strict? Of course. It's a moving target. It will be. So, insurance in particular, I find, because I go out and get new insurance, that's an issue. So what I would tell you is build to the standards that the county is requiring, and then if the insurer comes back and says, hey, you got to take the trees back another 10 feet, you're either going to look for a new insurance company or you're going to do what they say.
I'm hearing you, but I'm trying to do is understand, is kind of just wait a little bit and see if it all settles out. I don't know if it's ever going to settle out within the year, but maybe settle out.
It's probably not. But the whole picture won't, because of what's happening in our world. The insurance companies are going to continue probably to become more restrictive and set more guidelines in wildfire-prone areas or flood-prone areas. The government is going to continue to change their involvement in this because of the cost to government and the impact. So it really is fluid, and some people take the attitude, I'm going to hurry up and get my permit now while I know what's going on, and others take the attitude, I'm going to wait and see. But you just can't know for sure, but at any one given point in time, you should be able to contact your mortgage company, your proposed mortgage company, your proposed insurance company, and the county, and know what you need to do in order to be able to move forward.
One thing I can tell you, in over 30 years of building and development experience, they've never gone backwards. So from my perspective, if you're ready to get a permit, I'd get a permit rather than wait, because the requirements are only going to get more strict from my experience. Does that help?
And I can tell you from a lender's perspective, we rely on the Pikes Peak Regional Building Board. When they're satisfied and issue a certificate of occupancy, that's as far as we go in mechanics and projects.
Anybody that's trying to build a building department, that's.
I can't believe it.
They change the rules every month. Some indication there's a problem. Fire departments that
It's getting better. There didn't used to be much communication between fire, land use, regional building. Now there are mechanisms in place where the communication is getting better, and particularly because of events like Waldo and Black Forest Fire, there's even more and better communication. I think literally if you go in, first off, when I met with the builder today, he told me exactly what they were. It's just that I'm shy to tell you because I don't want to disappoint him. But I can tell you that a good quality builder will know exactly what those setback requirements would be. The landscape guys, they know what they are. Regional building, they'll be able to show you, page and verse, exactly what they are.
And the other thing I was just going to add to that is I can tell you the county is working way over time to, with limited resources to try to be responsive. And that's a good thing, but the sort of the difficult side of that is constant change, right? As we're trying to all figure this out and shake it out, because this is not, even though lots of disasters have happened, there's no specific blueprint for the Waldo fire or for the Black Forest fire, given what the land is and the circumstances of the time. And it's the same thing for you as an individual. So part of the encouragement that you were given by our financial planner, Brad, is don't get caught in that vortex, but try to take it a piece at a time and move forward so that you are in a good position to make a good decision.
Other questions that we might address to our guests? My experience is that typically what happens is you might have a little one-on-one time. So we've got about 10 minutes or so. I want to respect the folks that have volunteered their time tonight. So we'd like to wrap it up by 8 o'clock. So if we were to wrap up the open Q&A right now, and then we'll all stick around until 8 o'clock. If you'd like to come talk to us, we're here and we're glad to help you. And I'm sure the guys have got cards and you touch base with them. Carrie, anything else you'd like to say?
I just wanted to say a thank you to, and you may have done this in the beginning, Steve, but the folks from Aspen Point and from the county. Nancy is here filming again so that you can see all of these. If you need to go back and get a refresher on the county website or on the United Policyholders website. And RC, our disaster recovery manager, is here, which we really appreciate because he was able to answer those questions. And there are lots of resources, and sometimes it's hard to know which one to go to first. But the county website, Black Forest Together website, the Recovery Digest, those are all great resources to find out how to do things once you decide you're ready to do them.
For those of you folks that may have suffered a partial loss, a couple of resources. One, I don't see Masami, but I think she may still be. Don's here. Don had a partial loss. As I said, he just moved back into his home. Carrie had a partial. Sorry? Excuse me, a total loss. Thank you. Carrie had a partial loss. John, you just went through having your windows replaced. You're in the middle of your remodel. So again, we're here to help you, and we're glad you came out. Thank you very much. Oh, I did want to mention, we've got a roadmap to recovery coming up again on the 6th of February. We'll talk about smoke, extreme heat, and ash damage.
Yeah, that I wanted, please spread the word. This was really primarily more focused on people with total losses tonight, but there's always overlap and good information. So I encourage you to come next month to that meeting also. There will be a lot of things that will apply to you, but we are going to have a panel on partial loss, on doing things like documenting your loss, on talking about what to look for in more detail, and if you reach an impasse, how to try to move forward. And Amy Bach and a attorney from California who has worked through this for quite a while, all the way through the court systems, is going to be here, as well as some people with restoration advice. So we're collecting all the information and good people we can to come and give you information. So share that with your friends, because if the community works hard to restore their homes, it will help maintain and improve the value of our community as a whole. And so it's important.
The next thing I wanted to point out, I touched on it. John Trapani is the fellow that lost his house in the Northridge earthquake. He is going to come out to talk specifically and spend about 2 hours on taxation and dealing with uninsured loss deductions, the things that I've kind of outlined up here today. I saw a bunch of emails flying back and forth, so we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but the county has agreed to underwrite the cost of bringing him out. That'll be a very interesting topic, and for those of us who've suffered that experience, at least there's some benefit in offsetting some of your taxes. So with that, here's again the UP Help website. So if you haven't been on there, feel free, and we'll be up here for a bit to help answer any questions you have. Thank you for coming.